Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the 2021 Europe Liberty Forum. Although our event is coming to a close, I hope you're leaving us feeling inspired and well prepared for the path forward toward achieving your goals. After participating in the events of the past 2 days, I see so many reasons to hope for a more prosperous and a more free future for Europe. Thank you for all that you do at your various organizations and for participating so wonderfully in our program. I also want to pause and give yet another thank you to the generous sponsors of our regional Liberty Forums: the John Templeton Foundation, the Smith Family Foundation, the Templeton Religion Trust, the Frida Utley Foundation, the Thomas W. Smith Foundation, and lastly, the Sarah Scaife Foundation. Thank you for making these important exchanges and engagements possible. Before we move into the final discussion of the day and of the forum, I have an exciting announcement to make. The much-awaited announcement of the winner of the 2021 Europe Think Tank Shark Tank competition. Earlier today, we saw our contestants Aneta Vanya of the Lithuanian Free Market Institute and Daniel Herring from the Legatum Institute make their pitches to a panel of judges who have deliberated and decided on a winner. So without further ado, and a virtual drum roll, the winner of the 2021 Europe Think Tank Shark Tank competition is the Lithuanian Free Market Institute and Aneta Vanya. Congratulations, Aneta. Let's take a minute and view some of the highlights of her winning pitch.
Over the past 15 years, laws in Lithuania have doubled. Half of the laws require amendment just within a year of adoption. And 80% of laws challenged by the Constitutional Court are found literally unconstitutional. And one reason for this is that only 1 in 10 regulations come with impact assessment. These statistics show just how lousy lawmaking in Lithuania is. Previous governments avoided quality procedures. And as we know, if the rules are flawed, governments will take as much power as they can take. Our project, Better Laws for Better Lives, is aimed to upgrade lawmaking quality standards, which will eventually reverse these statistics and the government overreach behind them.
Thank you, Aneta, and congratulations to each of our contestants. I can't wait to see what you'll achieve with the prize funding. Well, we are ending this event with a discussion on a topic that is crucial to the current political and social environment that we find ourselves in. The last couple of decades have seen a general erosion of public trust in a wide range of social, scientific, political, and religious institutions. And the response to the COVID-19 pandemic has only escalated and exacerbated this issue. One of the institutions most hit by this trend in erosion of trust has been the media. In addition to multiple significant missteps by big media, government takeovers of local media, and the accelerated spread of fake news and misinformation by populist and authoritarian movements and leaders, we find ourselves at a potential tipping point for civil society and the role of a free and open media. Joining me today to discuss this issue and how we move forward in a productive and positive way are 4 distinguished panelists. First, let me introduce you to Martin Cote from the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom in Bulgaria. Next, we have Sasha Mirkovic from the Center for Anti-Authoritarian Studies in Serbia. Our third panelist is Martin Lesensky from the Open Society Institute in Bulgaria. And finally, we are joined by Irina Nedieva from the Association of European Journalists in Bulgaria. Welcome, panelists. We are so happy to have you with us to discuss this important topic. Martin, I want to start off with you, and maybe we start from kind of the 30,000-foot view of what's happening in the environment, as I alluded to in some of my opening comments. I'd love to just hear from you and get your perspective, and then maybe we'll hear from some of the other panelists. What's the problem What are we seeing at kind of a macro level, some of the big issues that media is facing in this crisis of trust? And how did we get here? Martin?
Thanks very much. Yes, I mean, what I think need to be talking about most and foremost is that actually journalism is in a commercial crisis and has been in such a crisis for more than 20 years by now. The business model of journalism as such seems to be eroding. I mean, in my home country of Germany, for example, newspaper circulation in total has halved within the last 20 years, down from about 30 million to only 15 million nowadays. And that sort of like includes major titles such as Der Spiegel, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, and even mass circulation Bild Zeitung. And many journalists, we have to be aware of that, have been sacked over this time. And I guess it's fair to say that today, about half as many journalists as 20 years ago have to provide twice as much content than back then, because they also have to feed their ever-hungry websites, not only the print editions. And in America, it strikes me that a paper such as the famous Washington Post is owned today by Jeff Bezos. And I guess it's fair to say he didn't only take it over to make money. And with regard to the New York Times, I think it was actually the constant moaning of Donald Trump about the failing New York Times that helped the paper to survive in a paradoxical way. But of course, there's a price to pay for that. And today, it's no longer all the news that's fit to print, but more all the news that's pleasing to the audience, which is, of course, not really what professional journalism should be about. This gets me worried because in my book, journalism essentially is and should remain to be about enlightenment, clear-cut information about the world, learning about the world in essence, not about just reinforcing my own stereotypes or anybody else's. So I think we need to acknowledge that the quality of journalism has been declining on a global scale in the recent past, and we need to be thinking of a re-professionalization of journalism. I want journalists to be able to come up with a competent, balanced, and independent critical assessment on any relevant question that our societies, East or West, North or South, have to face. And I think we are far from it these days. I'm talking judgment here, sound judgment. And I'm missing that. All I'm seeing is people reporting what somebody else said, and then also reporting what the opposition said. Journalism, in a word, has become too cheap, not only in content, but also in what we as consumers are ready to pay for it. And I think democracy has a price tag attached to it. And all of us, we have to consider how much it's going to be worth for us, democracy as such, in terms of nickels, dimes, and dollars on a daily basis. And we need to be working towards a return of quality journalism the world over.
Interesting. So, Martin, interesting thought in terms of kind of the business model. That's one issue definitely where we've seen that. Irina, I'd love to get maybe your insight as a follow-up. In addition to the economics of this, you also have governments perhaps that are stepping in and taking over media. So maybe talk a little bit about that particular issue in terms of, Jeff Bezos, the big Amazon guy, came in and bought, and you have big tech dominating on one side. You have this other side of the fence, which is somebody else stepping in and paying for it that maybe we don't want, and is media actually independent? So Irina, would love to hear your thoughts on maybe that issue.
I agree with Martin. Business model is important to be in the picture, but it's not only pleasing the audience or fighting for ratings or fighting for clickbaits that is the curating the quality of journalism. Pleasing the government is another bad thing that is happening to media, especially in our part of the world, with a very strong, still present totalitarian past, the shadows of this authoritarianism are still there. And there are still people and unfortunately politicians who do treat the media as their puppies. So the media is, the mission of journalism is deteriorating in this part of the world, like unfortunately Bulgaria and other Balkan countries and Russia. Russia is much worse. If we compare Bulgarian media situation with the Russian or Belarusian one, I should be silent. It seems like a paradise here, but we have a certain totalitarian heritage that makes things in media quality worse. And the idea to serve the government is something that is particularly unimaginable, because even private media, the big private media owners here, are somehow or have been somehow connected with the government because they want to have public tenders, access, money coming from governmental programs even. So the private media could also be somehow governmentally corrupted.
Interesting. Sasha, given some of the work that you do at CAS, I'd be interested in your thought, in some of the training that you do of journalists. What are some of the issues that they're bumping up against in their efforts to maybe provide an alternative narrative, or, even I think one of the challenges that Martin, in his comment, there's kind of built in is this quality of journalism, right? So there's a quantity, and but the quality of it maybe has gone down because everybody can be a journalist, right? Everybody can post something. So are you, as you work with these journalists, how are you addressing that issue, or are you seeing that issue as something that you have to kind of watch and monitor with what you're doing in your efforts in Serbia?
Yeah, well, thank you. I would agree with everything that has been said before, especially about the situation in Bulgaria, since the situation in Serbia is pretty much the same, maybe a bit worse since they're EU members and we're not, so they have a big daddy to control them, and we still do not have that. Yeah. My main problem with the established media is that I don't see them fighting to change the old ways the media has been regulated. So, for instance, in Serbia, we have this institution of the so-called national broadcasting frequency, and the main TV hubs are fighting for the right to broadcast across the whole nation. But when they get to that point, none of them try to present the idea that maybe it's an institution that should be abolished, because in a way it is suffocating the free voices of other people who simply do not have the means to ensure such a large network of, cameras and journalists and everything else. Our idea was that we've seen this untapped potential of young journalists who could use digital media and digital platforms to present their ideas and to present their work and to use their skills to promote these ideas of liberty. So the main problem that they were facing was that they had nowhere to go after finishing their schools, after finishing faculties and so on. They could just go to, maybe work in a shop or something else, but the knowledge that they gathered throughout the studies could not be used in an efficient way. So the idea that we had was to work in three lines, so to say. One would be to establish connections and partnerships with established medias, whether we talk about newspapers, TVs, radios, digital media, and so on. The other one would be to function as a platform ourselves and as producers of content. And the third one is this educational part, where we would combine political philosophy on one hand and the ideas of liberty with practical skills when it comes to digital media, to journalism, to fundraising, to creating video material, and so on and so on. So by combining these three, we make a sort of network that allows these young journalists to publish their works either through us or to get employed by our partners in already established media, which has happened since 2017 for every generation. The best graduates ended up in some of the bigger media companies and were able to present their ideas with the ideas of liberty that they were taught by us.
Yeah, you bring up something that caught my attention in your comment, and that is, in this media landscape, one of the challenges maybe that we don't talk about, particularly, I think this is really relevant in the broadcast media, but because of the control of big tech companies and the ability to deplatform, there is an ability to limit entrance into the market, right? You've got like the broadcasting licenses and so on. Interesting. Maren, as you've heard this conversation, anything that you would add to what's going on, what are you seeing, or how did we get here that might be worth just surfacing as part of this conversation that would be helpful for those watching our session today to be mindful of in this conversation?
Well, I've noticed the same. So it's we have seen the decline of mainstream media over the years, and this is a problem because it contributes to the decline of democracy in general, to the quality of democracy. So when you look at the bigger picture, when you have free media, you have a more healthy democracy. So they're connected, and my take is that we have to look back at the fundamentals of our societies in order to mend the societies.
Well, while I've got you, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question and shift gears just a little bit. So we definitely shared some opinions around the virtual table here about what's going on. And the next question for me is, well, can you prove it, right? I can say that there's these problems, but I also need some data. You know, that's been one of the problems. Like, say, anybody can throw out an opinion and put it on Twitter, and you know, people are sharing it. But what does the data say? And Maren, I know you've been doing a lot of work on this issue of how do we measure the problem of what we're seeing. And I'd love for you to just take a few minutes. I know you've got a couple of slides here, as we talked previously, to just talk a little bit about an initiative that you've been working on that says, hey, it's one thing to say there's a problem, there's another thing to show what's going on. So we'd love for you to take just a couple minutes and talk us through what you're seeing and what does the data tell us about the problems that we're seeing.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I've been invited to speak also about the Media Literacy Index that we developed at the Open Society Institute here in Sofia several years ago. And I promised to be very brief, so I'll show several slides just to get you the feeling of what is happening. So first of all, we decided to develop it as a response to the rise of fake news. And it was in 2016 when the word post-truth was selected word of the year by the Cambridge Dictionaries. So we decided to contribute a little bit to the debate and see what happens. So we came up with this Media Literacy Index, which, according to our definitions, measures not media literacy itself, but the resilience of society to fake news and the post-truth. And I'll show you the model that we developed because it's important in our conversation. So we decided to take readily available public indicators and put them in our model. So we decided that we're going to measure this resilience by the quality of education in society, by the level of media freedom in society. And as you see there are some percentages. This means how much importance we attach to these indicators. So quality of education and media freedom are the two biggest ingredients in our model. And then we have interpersonal trust or trust in other people as a proxy for civil society development, 10%, which is small. And then very small percentage participation, which is the participation by new forms of engagement. So, and when we put the data into computer, actually we have these results. We have a ranking of the 35 European countries included in the index. So, and because it's very small, you're not going to see much in this. So I'm just going to tell you that Finland has been the champion of the Media Literacy Index for 4 years in a row now, well ahead of the others. And this is shown in our rankings and also in practice, because there have been studies to show that actually Finland is quite ahead in dealing with fake news and promoting a Media Literacy Index. But we did something else, and I'll show you. We did a cluster analysis of the data, and this cluster analysis divided the countries into groups with similar characteristics. So when you see the map of the Media Literacy Index, the countries which are deep blue, actually the countries which are performing the best. So they're the most resilient to fake news. And this means that they have the most free media and the most best educated people. So, and when you go, then you have other countries, also the blue ones are performing well. And of course, the countries which are in yellowish, reddish, they're falling behind. And as you can see, the usual suspects, the Nordics, are doing pretty well in this in our index. And we are seeing definitely geographic patterns. And as you can see, the countries in Southeastern Europe have a really big problem because they're the end of the line. And this means two things, that they either have problems with media freedom or education, and also with quality of education. I can talk about why we picked this indicators, which is interesting to the conversation. And also because we are talking about trust a lot here. And that's why I decided to show you some data and a correlation that we did a couple of years ago. Actually, this was before the COVID crisis. But anyway, it shows the correlation between distrust in medical and health advice by medical workers and the results of the Media Literacy Index. And what this scatter graph shows us that the countries which have performed well in the Media Literacy Index have a very low distrust in medical advice. And vice versa, countries which have performing poorly in the Media Literacy Index have a high level of distrust in medical advice. And coming back to the COVID context, this means that fake news are literally bad for your health. This is what it says. And we see countries, like in the Balkans, where there is a huge distrust toward the medical profession. This is like 40% or over 35% in Montenegro, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and so on. And these two are definitely related. And my final graph will be also the correlation between the Media Literacy Index scores and distrust in journalists that we were talking about media today. And we also see this huge problem. Countries which are performing well in the Media Literacy Index have a very low distrust in journalists. On the opposite, countries which have low scores in the materiality index, have high levels of distrust in journalists. And in some places like Greece, this is over 85%. And, this is very troubling. And I have to mention that these are results a couple of years back. I don't know what the situation is now, but there's definitely an issue. And finally, we came up with one short recommendation, which is go, as I said, go back to the basics. So you need to deal with the fake news. We have to have free media. We have to have an educated public, and you have to have restored the trust. And in terms of education, and I'm a very big proponent of education, and this means education before any regulation, because especially in our part of the world, if you go to regulate something, this means restrictions, and if you restrict, there is a danger you can restrict freedom of speech.
Yeah.
So,
well, great. Well, thank you for that. Let me follow up with a question to Irina. Now that we've seen the data from Marin that he's so clearly displayed, one of those is the next question for us. Well, what do we do about it, right? And he mentioned a few things in terms of they give some weight to education and the free and open media. Irina, I'd be interested to know, given your position in working in kind of a professional association of journalists, what are they concerned about? What are they talking about in terms of what solutions are they proposing to say, listen, here's how we gain that trust back, right? So I'd love for you to kind of address that question, and what are your colleagues and peers saying across the EU around this distrust issue?
Absolutely. I agree with what Marin Lesinski presented. And you see, on the north, there is a critical thinking, good education, and people do not fall easily into the trap of general distrust. What we have here on the Balkans, in Bulgaria as well, we have audiences and people who doubt everything, but you can't live like this. You have to distinguish between true and false, and between the nuances, the shades. Otherwise, you will be completely lost. And we are in such a situation. Nobody believes big media. Nobody believes small media. Nobody believes traditional media. Nobody believes untraditional media, and people are easily falling into this trap of general distrust. Additional thing that is happening here is what we call info wars or media wars. Tabloid media that, for instance, attack civil activists, they attack gay activists, they attack minorities, ethnical minorities, vulnerable groups, sexual minorities, if I may use such a strange term. So we have something like yellow tabloid media that is even attacking the critical journalism, the critical independent journalists that do critical investigations, for instance. And it is like sending mud to everywhere. What to do in such a terrible situation? We asked ourselves in the Association of European Journalists. Basically, we decided to create this organization 10 years ago, when we understand that our profession is falling down. Is there somebody who would love to do something that is not credible? I don't believe so. So it's first of all, on a personal level. I will give you an example. Every morning, this morning, I had my live radio broadcast as usual, and all the time I'm asking myself the questions. Do I've got the facts right? Did I use my full critical abilities to extract the facts from the noise, informational noise, or spinned opinions? And on the personal level, it is what you should do. You should do this with your assistant editor. If in your newsroom there is a special team that is doing fact checking, great, but it costs money. And we are back to the economical business model of media Martin was talking about. Media is getting cheaper and cheaper. If one media can't afford a fact checking department, obviously the quality will not be the same. And that's why at AJ Bulgaria, we decided that we want to do professional trainings for professional journalists, not only young journalists, it's easy, but also we are trying somehow to appeal to elder generations in journalism, somehow to rebuild, first of all, the trust in ourselves, that we can improve, that there are ways that we should learn, we should constantly learn how to be better, how to do better our job. And second, when we recognize this paradox of doubt, because many people think that if they doubt, well, they are great, they are critical, they have critical thinking. No, it could be also a trap, because you should have some basics. It's better to believe to science than to rumors, you know. And if you doubt in science, it's not good at all. If you doubt in people that might misuse the power, maybe it's good for critical journalism. But we should distinguish the notions, and we should do this for our audiences and for ourselves as well. And that's why somehow Bulgarian organization, the Bulgarian AJ, started to talk with other national organizations in the bigger, the umbrella International AJ, International Association of European Journalists. And we started to do something like a consultation in between different national sections, because we wanted to take part in the public consultation opened by the European Commission, if you remember, after Brexit and after the election of Donald Trump in the United States. And this public consultation opened by EU was exactly about disinformation. Yep. And what we do is we inform, we teach, not only the others, and not only journalists, but ourselves as well. I have to say that with the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, last year during COVID pandemic, we did one great publication, one book about chronicles of infodemic, following all the small trends and traps that are disinforming us about the pandemic. And we also did one fact-checking guidebook for journalists, and a fact-checking tools developed for the audiences, how they could check the facts that are proposed to them by the media. And I think
interesting.
Right.
I see, Martin, I see you nodding your head a lot. So it sounds like there's some agreement there. Again, you're in a unique position with the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in terms of, you know, you're really looking across the macro level of what's going on. What are some conversations you're having as you see this issue in terms of, well, where do we go next? It's one thing to talk about the problem, but we need to provide solutions, right? We don't want to just sit back and, well, it's off, isn't it awful? What do we want to do? So what's some of the approach that you've taken at the foundation, and what are some of the conversations maybe with your colleagues of how do we take some positive steps forward for the profession and for journalism in Europe, but also, you know, globally as the foundation works on a global scale?
I will happily attempt to do that, but let me get back to what Irina said and to Marine's beautiful map showing sort of like our corner of the world only in yellow and red, and then the northern and western parts all in blue. And I want you to think again, because I do not think that you are sort of like behind the West and in any way worse off. But in fact, you are the pioneers of this entire development, and you have much more experience in dealing and fighting with it than we have ever had. So I would, I mean, Poland was bluish too, like Germany, which I find was amazing. And my guess is it is only going to be a matter of time when this map is turning yellowish from the east towards the west. And that's my crucial point. You guys, with this sensitivity for the particular vulnerabilities of your societies, I think you guys are ahead. And what you do about media literacy is more advanced to what you do. And I remember before I came to Sofia, I was talking to this lady from the European Commission on the issue. And she was so academic and so sort of like far away from it. And you guys deal with it every day. It becomes a physical type of threat and occurrence, and you're fighting for something. And I find that is so encouraging. And don't think that you guys are in any way behind. This is the front line of the defense of freedom. And we need to be fighting the good fight there. And I find, Irina, what we did to support you, we learned more from you than you did from us. You can rely on that. And what you do on a daily basis, assembling and presenting your program, and just questioning yourself, that's something that the average journalist in the West doesn't do anymore. They just aim to get audience. I mean, clicks, baits, circulation. They take it as a they need to fend off the commercial decline of the entire thing. I think you are ahead.
Yeah. So Martin, maybe a quick follow-up on that. Again, given your role, oftentimes we'll have donors that are participating in these sessions. What would you say to the donors if they're looking for solutions? What made you interested, for example, in Irina's program? What are you looking for in trying to solve this problem? I think it'd be interesting to hear your approach as the donor, looking to maybe change the economics a little bit or help move in a positive direction. So from a donor's perspective, how do we play a part, or how does a donor play a meaningful part in helping this issue?
I mean, very simple. For a donor, they need to be investing in increased credibility of available quality media. That means that they need to make sure that whatever media they support supplies quality in journalism and supports the journalists working on those outlets with money, with means, they need to be doing intensive research. There's a lot of time wasted in journalism all over the world. You need to be able to sort of like sustain these periods, make quality journalism happen again the world over. And that is, for me, the focus should be then on the individual outlets. Make sure that they are able to provide quality, not only we are fighting the good war, or are the guys with the white hats on, and those are the guys with the black hats on, and stuff like that. It's about competence. It's about judgment. It's about expertise that you have to have in any question that we are talking about. And once media regain that type of credibility, it's going to be much harder for fake news or misinformation to succeed and sort of like trickle down and destroy society as such. That would be my major point.
On this quality and competence issue, I know, Sasha, you've got a robust program that you do. Do you provide like a certification saying, has there maybe been an effort to try to create a brand around the kind of journalists that you produce in terms of their capability, competence, understanding of ethics? I don't know if you have or not. Obviously we don't want to create a bunch of occupational licensing around journalism. We want the free market to create that standard. So how do you do that at CAS? Again, kind of to Irina's point and the investment that Martin talked about. What's been your approach at CAS to raise the bar in terms of the journalists that you're trying to prepare?
Well, I'd say that we have created a specific brand of journalists, young journalists. On one hand, our partners from established media provide them with technical knowledge that can make them better journalists. But on our part, we try to teach them that it's not about repeating the messages that we've heard a lot of times before. It's not about academic approach to this problem, but rather to play on emotion the same way that those who are opponents of freedom play on emotion. You cannot win this battle by speaking about marginal utility, supply and demand, and stuff like that. Those questions, the truth here is the Pyrrhetian sink that we learned about on LCL. Now, you cannot speak about it in those terms. You have to take an example in your surrounding, in your history, because Balkan people love their history, and we're pretty nationalistic and pretty traditional, and we like honor, we like our forebears. So you can take, for instance, an example of a Serbian king called Peter I, who was the only king, as far as I know, who translated John Stuart Mill's On Freedom book. You take that, you promote it, you create a story around it, you create a story about history, about rulers in the past who did something great. You cannot just come to the public and speak about things that they are not interested in, because you know for a fact that facts presented directly simply do not work. So we try to teach them that it's about not just knowing the journalist techniques, but also knowing how to present the message that you want to publish.
Well, Sasha, we definitely appreciate the little promotion of the Atlas training. LCL is Lights, Camera, Liberty. We're big fans here too. So I remember meeting you the first time in LA at that event. So I appreciate that that little hat tip there. Why don't we end on this question here? Again, really getting to solutions, and that is, so we've talked about the problem. We've seen what it looks like in the data. For our partner network, for those that are online joining us, the real question is, well, how do we bring this home? What does it mean for my organization? What can I do? Martin, you brought up a couple of points in the data. Number one, you were looking at education as a major factor. Maybe we can get to you in a minute speaking a little bit, what might be some policy solutions or things that we can attract that way. Then, I want to get, though, to Sasha first, because, my understanding of the founding of CAS was you thought about starting maybe a traditional think tank, and then as you got into it, say, wait a minute, the problem isn't there, the problem is somewhere else. And so there was a real strategic decision at the beginning to take a different approach, actually with the journalistic focus. So I'd love for you just to maybe give a little bit of background of, you were a little bit ahead of your time in that, you were started several years ago before kind of the Donald Trump situation hit or the crisis in media that we're seeing here. And so talk a little bit about that journey for CAS and how you really made solving this problem core to what you're trying to do.
Well, we do not believe that this is a battle that we can win in short term, only in the long term by slowly moving the Overton window, by influencing the future opinion makers or current opinion makers. The problem that Serbia has, most of all, is demographic problem. We have low net immigration, low birth rate, and this leads us to ever older population. And as population gets older, it's not really fond of sudden changes or changes towards something else. They are more fond of talking about the good old days, whether it's under, I don't know, Slobodan Milošević or Josip Broz or who knows who. So our idea was to not spread ourselves on all sides, but to focus on the future opinion makers, specifically on journalists and artists, because we saw them as a part of population that was mostly influenced by leftist ideas. When it comes to Serbian youth, you can just make a clear line between those who are radical right and radical left. Only a small minority in between is open to conversations, open to different ideas and so on. This is a problem of educational system. For instance, I finished the Faculty of Philosophy, Sociology, and all I heard all day, every day was Marx this, Marx that, Marx this, Marx that. Yeah. So I suppose that this is the experience of other current students or ex-students that are similar age as I am. So the idea was to attract somebody who has a clear talent but doesn't really know how to utilize it and is pretty susceptible in that young age towards the ideas that will not benefit anybody except the ruling few if they grab the power, of course. So we started out as a small student organization trying to move the story on our faculty a bit towards the ideas of liberty, to move them a bit away from Marxism. And we managed to do that to some extent. The problem was that there was the lack of action on behalf of the institutions that didn't want to change. They felt that it was more easy to just forbid us from having our debates and discussions than to protect us from the radical left and radical right, who would very often interrupt the sessions that we hosted and so on and so on. So after graduating, we decided that we should become a real deal and not just a student organization, and we should look at the bigger picture, because this was not just a problem of our faculty, but rather a problem of the whole society. So as I said before, this was an untapped potential, and we saw that it was an opportunity to create a sort of network that would enable us to influence in the far end those who are ruling the country, because there was no way to approach them directly. So by combining the coordination with traditional media, the education of young journalists and artists, and by creating our own material, we managed to do that. So, for example, we made a movie last year about Serbian peasants and the hard lives that they face because of the state-sponsored usurpation of their land, justified by some geopolitical reasons. And this movie had been broadcasted 3 times on TV with national frequency. Our graduates of our School of Journalism and School of Academy of Political Philosophy started talking about it, started writing reviews, sharing it. One of the political parties whose member spoke in the documentary went public with a statement about this problem and included a solution in their program. And finally, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure gave a statement about the ways in which the problem could be solved. Since Serbia's political arena is closed, there was no way, probably no way, that we could approach the minister. But after facing such a public pressure, after growing interest for such a question, she was forced to step in front of the public and to start cooperating with the Ministry of Finance in providing the new regulations. So the basic idea was just to focus on that part of population, which could be a changing force in the long run.
Interesting. Marin, I'll turn to you. Again, you mentioned in terms of how you weighed it, the education system. So as you know, and kind of speaking to the partners who are in that virtual space right now, what would be some of your thoughts in terms of reforms or ways that, you know, education might be improved to help with the current situation of mistrust, erosion of trust in the environment, or, you know, if there's another solution? But again, what do we do? Walking out of this, what would somebody, one of our partners say, yeah, I think we could do that? What would that be that they could go back home and begin to work on to improve the environment in their particular country?
So I want to say 3 things here very quickly. So first is that we're using indicators for functional education. So this is the basics. So we have to improve that. This is actually the key for everything. So that's key. Then you have specialized education that we talked about. It's media literacy and digital literacy. And you have to engage not only the young people, but also the elderly. they're essential. So also things that other organizations are doing, like fact checking, like that Irina mentioned, are essential in this regard. So these are the most important things that have to be introduced from this point of view. So functional education and specialized education. And because when we discussed the results of this media literacy index some years ago, some experts actually suggested that a better educated public has grows a demand for more quality media. So it's again, we should look at this side of
Interesting.
grow the demand. Yeah.
Great. We've got just a couple minutes left, and so I want to give Irina and Martin a chance to answer that same question too. So just briefly, Irina, what would you add? What can we go home and start to work on today? Across this partner network, what would be a recommendation that you would have in terms of a way for us to help improve this particular issue or situation?
First of all, to have in mind that the media are different and the quality of the media are different, and the good quality should be supported, not only through direct payment or something like this, but by stopping the misuse of media, because politicians tend to misuse the media for their purposes, people on power as well. So to restore the trust in the media is to somehow to give the civil society the feeling that they need the media in order to know what these people on power are doing with, for instance, the public money. And if there is such kind of a reasoning, people will start understanding how they need quality media. The other thing, I don't believe that it will be always like this. Ratings, fighting for clickbites, because people are slowly fading up with this. They need something more. And I believe in longer journalism, longer format journalism, knowledge back into the picture, people who need facts, and there are some proofs for this. Everybody is telling to radio people like me, because I work with the public radio here, that people want short pieces of talk. They want more music than talk. Please be short. Be even shorter, quicker. And what a surprise, people do listen podcasts of more than 40 minutes. People prefer to read long reads. People slowly are moving to slowing down the pace, the speed, because it's natural. When you have everything instantly given by internet and by the new means of communication, you are going to the opposite direction. Well, let us slow down. Let us go into something more deeper in quality. So I'm a very big optimist.
Yeah, interesting. Two thoughts for me that really pop. Number one, there is a delicate balance where we criticize the media, but we have to be careful that if we actually undermine the institution that we need for civil society, it's a fine line that we walk. And that, yeah, maybe it's time that we challenge some of the assumptions of what we think will work, that maybe the pendulum is coming back in a different direction than what it has been. Martin, kind of a final solution, final word as we wrap up. What can we do? What would be one thing, from your perspective, that we could do to address this issue positively?
First of all, I couldn't agree more with Irina when she's talking about podcasts and sort of like the long formats that people really enjoy to be listening. And format radio has been destroyed by radio managers themselves. So, I mean, this is, we need to be looking at ourselves. There is something new popping up there. What do we need to be doing? We need to be delivering on the promises of democracy. And we need to be aware that there has been so much frustration and disappointment created in Eastern Europe by the West not really delivering on what they promised in a way. And this gave sort of like, this was sort of like the inroads into which the Russians and others just marched to be spreading this fake news and disinformation so successfully. It's about our Western commitment, and it's about us believing in Europe. And it's about delivering on what Europe means in terms of democracy, social values, wealth, and sustainability. And we are not really doing this because we've been becoming complacent in so many ways. And that's something that we need to be tackling. And again, I sort of like, I bank on these people from Eastern Europe to take the lead on many burning questions here, because they are the ones that feel the pressure, and they are the ones that whose governments are after them, and just taking advantage of certain situations and conditions that haven't been sort of like met with the type of resistance they should have been met with if we were serious on our side in the West as well.
Wonderful. Great note to end on. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Irina. Thank you, Maren. Thank you, Sasha, for an extremely enlightening discussion. Appreciate your participation. With that, we come to a close, and we want to thank everyone for joining us for the Europe Liberty Forum 2021. And thank you to our co-hosts, the Institute for Market Economics, for all they did to make this forum a success. It is our hope to be in person next year in Kiev, so please stay tuned for updates. I do hope that you plan to join us in Miami for our annual Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner, which will take place in person, as well as have an online component to it that you can participate if you can't join us in person. That will take place on Monday and Tuesday, December 13th and 14th. And finally, as we learn and adapt to the new hybrid world that we're living in, we want to learn as much as we can about your virtual experience. Soon you'll receive an event survey in your email, and we would love to hear your thoughts on how we can continue to improve for the future. So please take a moment to do that. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.